Heightened risk of genocide against Christian Tigrayans in Ethiopia. From Forbes magazine, by Dr. Yulina Uakab. October 26, 2022. On October 25, 2022, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum issued a warning of a heightened risk of genocide in Ethiopia's Tigray region. According to the statement, the situation has deteriorated exponentially as Ethiopian security forces, supported by Eritrean forces and Amhara special forces, have seized key towns and cities imperiling vulnerable Tigrayan civilians. As the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum added, ethnic-based targeting and the commission of mass atrocities have been an intentional strategy of parties to the conflict between the Ethiopian and regional Tigrayan governments and their allies. That began November 2020. In the past 2 years, crimes against humanity and war crimes have been perpetrated with impunity. These crimes include murder, rape, sexual violence, persecution, and other inhumane acts. There is growing evidence of sexual slavery and forced pregnancy. This is not the first such warning concerning the situation in Ethiopia and the risk of genocide. Indeed, in December 2021, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum identified several warning signs of potential genocide against the Tigray people, including reports of massacres and other targeted killings of Tigrayan civilians, dehumanization and hate speech, amplified on social media, encouraging violence against members of the group, mass arrests and arbitrary detention, and possible collective punishment in the form of a human-made famine in the Tigray region. The warning comes also after, on October 17, 2022, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that the situation in Ethiopia is spiraling out of control. Violence and destruction have reached alarming levels. The social fabric is being ripped apart. Civilians are paying a horrific price. Indiscriminate attacks, including in residential areas, are killing more innocent people every day, damaging critical infrastructure and limiting access to vital services. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes since hostilities resumed in August, many of them for the second time. We are also hearing disturbing accounts of sexual violence and other acts of brutality against women, children and men. These reports are not new. Among others, in August 2021, Amnesty International published a report concluding that sexual violence in the context of the conflict has been accompanied by shocking levels of brutality, including beatings, death threats, and ethnic slurs. It is often accompanied by threats and by additional acts of physical and psychological torture aimed at causing lasting fear and physical and psychological damage. The majority of the interviewed women and girls were gang raped. The victims included children and pregnant women. Some of the abused women and girls were held in sexual slavery for several weeks. As Amnesty International concluded, the patterns of sexual violence emerging from survivors' accounts indicate that the violations have been part of a strategy to terrorize, degrade, and humiliate both the victims and their ethnic group. In December 2021, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch published a detailed account of the situation in Tigray, indicating that Amhara security forces are responsible for a surge of mass detentions, killings, and forced expulsions of ethnic Tigrayans in the western Tigray territory of northern Ethiopia.
Today is my first day as U.S. Secretary of State, and recording this message is one of the first things I'm doing, because Holocaust Remembrance Day matters a great deal. It matters to me personally, as the stepson of a Holocaust survivor. My stepfather was just a boy when he lost his entire family to the Nazis. He spent nearly 4 years in labor and death camps before he managed to escape and was later rescued by American troops. The story made a deep impression on me. It taught me that evil on a grand scale can and does happen in our world, and that we have a responsibility to do everything we can to stop it. Those lessons are as vital now as they've ever been, maybe more so. It's no accident that people who seek to create instability and undermine democracy often try to cast doubt on the Holocaust. They want to blur the line between truth and lies. They want to use disinformation and conspiracy theories to gain power. And they want to provoke hate against Jewish people and more broadly against refugees and asylum seekers, people of color, LGBTQ people, anyone who has been targeted for violence and dehumanized because of who they are. That's why it's so important that we speak the truth about the past, to protect the facts when others try to distort or trivialize Holocaust crimes, and to seek justice for the survivors and their families. Every day that I serve as Secretary of State, I will carry the memory of my stepfather and his family and the 6 million Jewish people and millions of others who were killed during the Holocaust. I will remember that a nation's power isn't measured only by the size of its military and economy, but by the moral choices it makes. And I will remember that atrocities like the Holocaust don't just happen. They're allowed to happen. It's up to us to stop them. Never again. Thank you.
We have, as you know, forces from Eritrea that are there, and we have forces from an adjoining region, Amhara, that are there. They need to come out, and a force that will not abuse the human rights of the people of Tigray or commit acts of ethnic cleansing, which we've seen in Western Tigray, that has to stop. We also need full accountability. We need to get an independent investigation into what took place there.
Autumn presents A Reporter at Large, published in the print issue of The New Yorker with the headline, The Palace Gates, written by John Lee Anderson. The conflict in Tigray has frozen international aid. As a result of the fighting and the evidence of war crimes, the Biden administration has cut off Ethiopia's access to credits and loans. But Abiy has other funders who are less concerned with human rights violations. On a helicopter trip to Awash National Park, a swampy wilderness east of Addis, he traveled with a group of Emiratis, whom he introduced vaguely as friends. Abiy had built a lakeside tourist resort in the park. The water was disconcertingly infested with crocodiles, but the landscape was ruggedly beautiful, and the developers had erected kid-friendly animal statues around the grounds. The resort was one of half a dozen that Abiy was having constructed in Ethiopia. The idea was to seek international partners that would run them as concessions, and to use them as hubs to develop the countryside. Over dinner, at a long table by a swimming pool, we listened as Abiy spoke about how Ethiopia could be useful to its allies. For one thing, he suggested, Ethiopia could fight their wars for them. He had noticed that Westerners no longer seemed eager to send their sons into combat, but Ethiopians were good fighters, he said, and did not have the same qualms. The Americans should step up their role here, he said, but if they don't come, there are others, you know, who are interested. Ethiopia's relationship with the United States was a preoccupation for Abiy. During a helicopter trip through the countryside, he turned away from the view and declared how much he loved the U.S. Really, he said, America is a beautiful country, and the Americans are very good people. And I know the country, maybe better than some Americans. I've driven from Washington all the way to California. In the mid-2000s, Ethiopia became a regional ally of the U.S., sending troops to invade Somalia to fight al-Shabaab, an insurgent group linked to al-Qaeda. After Abiy's time in the military, he worked for the government in cybersecurity and intelligence, and spent some time in U.S. training programs. In the Iraq War, I fought with them, he said. I was the one who would send intelligence from this part of the world to the NSA on Sudan and Yemen and Somalia. The NSA knows me. I would fight and die for America. The NSA knows me. I would fight and die for America. The NSA knows me. I would fight and die for America.
Maybe a word about what is the aim of Ethiopia. When I met the Ethiopian leadership in February, they really used this kind of language that they are going to destroy the Tigrayans, they are going to wipe out the Tigrayans for 100 years and so forth, which for me referred to very serious human rights atrocities and crimes as well. If you wipe out your national minority, what is it? It's you cannot destroy all the people, you cannot destroy all the population in Tigray, and I think that's very obvious that we have to react and because it looks for us like ethnic cleansing. It is a very serious act if this is true.